Hello, everyone. Welcome to Circling the Bases. My name is Chris Crawford. Thanks for joining us today. Should be a fun one. Right around the All-Star break. It's getting fun. My Mariners are competing. I'm going to call them my Mariners because they're actually good for once. And I'm actually going to ask my guest about one of their players who hasn't been so good. But that's just a little bit of whatever that word is supposed to be. Let me bring on my guest. You have read his writing and seen his face in a variety of places. And he currently covers prospects and the draft for the ESPN. Please welcome Kiley McDaniel. Kiley, how's it going?
Shouts to the CEO, Baby Yoda. Thanks for having me.
Yeah.
I almost like being in Atlanta when you played that intro music. I don't know if that's like everyone else could hear that. I wanted to throw some ad libs on it, but I was like, I don't sound like the Migos, so like it wasn't appropriate. But I had the inclination to do it.
Oh, well, it's that'll be something for the Patreon if we ever do a Patreon. Kiley, last time I asked you a really important question about St. Louis pizza, and you didn't have nobody's actually had a really great answer about St. Louis pizza, but I've asked my last two guests this very important question as well. David Roth and Andrew Stoughton have both agreed so far with this theory. We'll see if you do too. Is Jurassic Park a horror movie?
Oh, I thought it was gonna be food related. I was winding up for that.
I know. I'm sorry.
I think it depends on your definition of horror, which is like not an answer anyone wants. But
Okay.
I take a broader definition of that because I'm not a horror movie person. Like when you get into like the sort of Saws and the Eli Roth area, it's not for me at all. So I have a broad definition that I can throw stuff into.
Sure.
And I go on the fringes, which I think is more the Jurassic Park fringy area, or like Get Out, which I think most people call thriller, but not horror. But like
Yes.
it feels like horror to me because I don't want to go much further than that.
Okay, that's fair. It's what we like to call Get Out, by the way, and it's it's good stuff, but they call it elevated horror, which I think is really insulting to like other horror movies. It's like
elevated is not a word you want to throw on.
Yeah, it just means the other stuff, in your opinion, is crap. If you're calling,
How did we learn over the years when everyone had like highbrow taste and thought Guy Fieri was dumb, and now we've realized the one thing we can all agree on? It's like, let's just stop. Like at some point, I don't want to believe this, but I think Nickelback's going to come around and people are going to appreciate like all the punchlines. Is Scott Stapp going to be the only person that everyone agrees is like unlikable? Like, I don't know, but I'm like hesitant to do stuff like that because, there's lowbrow things I like, so they don't seem lowbrow to me. Or maybe I'm just lowbrow. I don't know. It's hard to distinguish where the endpoints are here.
The last two Adam Sandler movies have been extremely critically acclaimed. So, I mean, except there was Hubie Halloween in between those, which I don't think was quite
the trash can nachos of his oeuvre.
Yeah. I personally think Jurassic Park is a horror movie. Just because of the beats and like the formula, and there's some really scary jump scares in that movie, especially when, for lack of a better term, Newman gets killed by that dinosaur. That still is a scene that I have to. It's to me it just has the beats of it. Let's talk about baseball.
Yeah, hold on. Before we transition to baseball,
sure.
I'm not trying to go there too soon.
Yeah.
I haven't seen it in a while, Jurassic Park. So put a button on that. So it's not familiar in my mind. I'm looking on, I have my other screen right here, so I keep looking off screen at the St. Louis Pizza. And what this jogs for me is there is a Detroit pizza style place in Atlanta that I've been meaning to go to. And I was sitting there with Alden Gonzalez, who was in town for the Freddie Freeman, Atlanta, all that stuff.
Name drop.
And we went there, and they have like all, like 4 different styles of pizza there, but they're like, we're known for the Detroit. So we got it. And after like 2 or 3 bites, we got like, the big pie. We both take 3-4 slices. It's like the square, the deep, the whole deal. And like we both finish an entire piece, grab a second piece, and then I look at him like, this is really good, right? He's like, I was just about to say that. Like, I didn't want to believe this would be good. I thought it was just a different style of a thing that's not quite as good. There's a place in Atlanta called Nina and Rafi's. It's on the Beltline. If you're in Atlanta, holy cow, was that good.
Oh, boy.
We got the sort of sweet heat. It has like the hot peppers and the hot honey and pepperoni.
Okay. Ooh, that sounds good.
Yeah, I'm gonna send you some links so you can see it. But yeah, if you're in Atlanta, go on the Beltline and go find that place. And they also have really good beer. So yeah, it was an excellent experience. And you say St. Louis Pizza, and I'm like, nah, Detroit. I'm out of here.
Can you quickly describe what the Detroit style of pizza is?
Yeah, so I think it makes sense that it's near Chicago because it is a deeper dish, but
Hmm.
think like extremely deep dish. But start with your New York style. Make it
Hmm.
like 4 times as deep, and then the outside of it, what I believe is before they put the crust in the deep pan, they put a bunch of cheese on the outside. So you
Okay.
have like caramelized burned cheese around the outside, and then a
Mm.
very thick, like as thick as a Pizza Hut pizza has ever been. It's like that and square with that caramelized burnt cheese around the outside, and then they kind of pile on the toppings too. So it's a pretty formidable. You're getting like a chunk of like double thick ciabatta.
That sounds good. Whenever I've seen it described or heard it described, I should say, I've always thought of like French bread pizza. You know what I mean? Like that's the type of
Similar
style
idea,
of
yeah.
what your pizza, or something that, like an elevated, there's that word again, style of what you might get from like your middle school pizza, that square, efficient version. But I think it sounds good. Like compared to like St. Louis pizza, and I'm sorry again for bringing this up, the Provel cheese and the cracker crust just sounds so disgusting to me.
That's
But
the
I am.
distinguishing characteristics. I'm just looking at photos. I didn't know that's what was on there.
Oh yeah, yeah, Provel cheese, and anytime your cheese is basically a concoction, I'm going to say hard pass. All right, now let's talk about some baseball, and
I
I'm
just
I'm
proceeded on
sure.
to the pizza. Sorry.
Thank you very much. I appreciate that. Kylie, we saw a ton of rookies start the year on MLB rosters, like a ton. Like, believe of my top 100 fantasy prospects, something like 18 or 19 guys were on MLB rosters to begin the year. You are a guy. You're Mr. Connected. You are a
Okay.
person who has a lot of the phones. You're the Woj bomb of prospect people, in my personal opinion, and you're going to take that as a compliment.
I literally have 2 phones.
Okay, you need 2 phones, like my friend Kevin Gates. That is going to be a deep drop for somebody will understand that reference,
No, I
and
got
that
it.
is okay. Thank you. Do you think how much of this do you think was, because this is going to be something that we're going to have to pay attention to going forward? How much of this was the new rules put together by the CBA, the fact that a lot of these players happened to be at the high level? So was this a perfect storm of those guys being ready, the new rules, a combo of both? If you had to say one more than the other, what would you say?
I think it was. If we're talking just opening day, the rules definitely affected that.
Sure.
I think that as much as we thought that was like a problem that couldn't be solved, I think they did a decent enough job. I think teams are still going to do that. You're still going to see some Chris Bryant, Ronald Acuna Jr., like where the stakes are high enough and the team is, I don't know, incentivized enough to do the thing that we don't want them to do.
Right.
It's also still like 2 weeks. Like it's not cheating the fans as much as it's cheating the player. But that seems to be happening less. And so, yeah, I think that happened. I think we also, because I like pinpointed it when I was doing my list in the off season, where I was like, oh, it's like, I think I actually tweeted about it. I'll have to go back and look after we're done here. But I think I pointed out like half of my top 25 is like either going to start in AAA or the big league or something like that, where we're just like, oh, we just have like a weird occurrence where there are a bunch of dudes that didn't quite make it last year or got manipulated last year and are like, due for a spot to start this year. And then I actually wrote something that was not scheduled about who is the best prospect currently in the minors like a month ago. If
Hmm.
you noticed, I think it was at that point, I think it was like 10 of my top 20, like were either had graduated or were in the big leagues. And so
Sure.
then it was like, all right, I guess we'll start at like number 8 in the offseason list. It's probably just number 1 right now. And my editor's like, that's an article. Like no one's doing the math this quickly that like, Francisco Alvarez goes from 8 to 1 and like Volpe goes from, 6 to 2 or, whatever it was. Like people are doing that math inherently, and then O'Neill Cruz and Riley Green were about to go up but hadn't gone up yet, and Corbin Carroll had the big breakthrough. Anyway, to answer your question, I think it was for the big opening day stuff specifically, the rules affected it, and for a bunch of rookies in the first month in general, I think was I don't love the term perfect storm, but a lot of things came together for a rare occurrence. If you'd like to be
Sure.
about it,
Do you like the movie Perfect Storm with George Clooney and Mark Wahlberg?
have not seen it.
It's okay.
Yeah,
It's fine.
I've never had anyone pound the table and tell me I needed to see it, so I just never got to it.
There's some really cool special effects. That movie came out when I was working in a movie theater, and a lot of people had to leave, I think, because motion sickness. So that was a lot of fun
If I'm
too.
not mistaken, one of the best special effects was all the accents, right?
Yeah, oh, absolutely. Now,
That's what I'm about the movie. It's like notable
yeah,
the accents.
Mark was really, really digging his Boston at that point. There's no doubt about that.
He's from
But
Boston?
The Mark Wahlberg George was in that one. I call him George. We're pretty good friends. I also call him.
Yeah, there's a couple familiar names.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah, me and Bobby sometimes will hang out and talk about prospects sometime. So a lot of these prospects who have been called up have been pretty successful. I think you've seen what Julio Rodriguez has done, especially after called strike gate was such an issue for him at the beginning of the year. Bobby Witt Jr.
Weird, right?
It was very weird, and it was
Once or twice, I'm like, it's a rookie. They're hazing.
Yeah,
it's fine. It was like happened like 6 times, didn't it?
Yeah, oh yeah, and it was what was funny was I was actually surprised that he wasn't the guy. I think it was like Trevor Story who had more called third strikes that were not called third strikes, but it was very obvious to me just because I'm going to be watching those games with grandma and stuff like that. But after becoming a little more assertive at the plate, things have gone really well for him. Bobby Witt Jr. is obviously looking more comfortable at the plate. I want to talk to you about a guy that I believe we were both pretty high on. I could be wrong. This is a guy who also plays with Julio Rodriguez, and his name is Jared Kelenic. And as a Major League Baseball player, this guy has been borderline a disaster. Much better defense in right field. That is the positive that we can take from there. But the offense has just been so basically abhorrent. Kiley, what does the league think about Jared Kelenic at this point? And do you still have any hope for this guy to reach the ceiling of what we thought he was as a prospect coming into 2021?
So the guys that are hardest for me to have a strong opinion on are guys that answered every question all the way to AAA.
Right.
Doesn't work in the big leagues, and then they're just yo-yoing back and forth. And if they're on a good team, they like don't get to play. They come up when the guy's hurt. They're not very good for a week. They get set back down, and then it's just like, well, now you're just screwing with his head. Like, it's not like he's going to get any better in this situation or solve any of the problems.
No.
Because he's trying to not get benched and sit down. He's not trying to succeed or settle in. And I feel like I don't know, there's like a handful of these guys every year. And sometimes it's like Lewis Brinson, where it's like he is so physically talented, he's going to demolish AAA. And he's so physically talented, he's not going to learn lessons in AAA. He has to learn them in the big leagues. But then after 3 or 4 years of getting yo-yoed around, whether he's going to figure it out or not, he's not going to do it in the way he's being used. Then all of a sudden he's out of options, and it's just like, all right, career over. Could it have worked in some scenario? Maybe. I don't know. Obviously, we all thought it would at some point. And there, I don't remember, like, the first guy I had this issue with was Hank Blaylock, who, like, came up and was like, all right, make swing and miss, but those are home runs. And he swung and missed a lot.
Yeah.
It ended up being, like, okay. Like, usually they end up being a diminished version of what the expectation was. But a lot of times, even if it's like, Nelson Cruz, Carlos Pena, like they hit waivers multiple times, and year 6, or like Aramis Ramirez gets tons of playing time but isn't actually good until like his 5th year in the big leagues. They usually become something when they're that good in AAA and that talented, and that touted, that young, all that kind of thing. And so I found this year I'm doing a similar thing with the draft, but I'll keep on this Kelenic topic. In general, when there are a bunch of players on prospect list and whatnot, I'm thinking specifically of like Juan Soto, who's in the middle of the top 100 after he'd barely even played full season ball, and then he gets promoted to like low A, high A, then like double A, then like the big leagues, like all at once. And I think all the prospect people were scrambling because they're like, all right, he's obviously better than 50th or wherever we had him when the season started. That was a pretty aggressive ranking that almost all of us had the same answer going into the year, and it was all based on essentially like hype and backfields and short season stuff. Like it's as aggressive as you could be. And then it was like, well, can a month of games in low A make me take him and put him at 7th on the top 100? In retrospect, yes, that should have been when you hit the gas and really moved him. And so the thing I've done is when there's a guy that I like, and my scouting report going into the year is some version of if he performs, then he'll move up. Like a guy that checks all the boxes, but you need some information. Francisco Alvarez, great example. I think I rated him like 90th on some top 100. I was like, if he hits, oh boy. And then he was hitting in midseason. I was like, let's just put him 20. Like I said, this is what we need to do, and he did it. What are we doing here? And sometimes you'll miss doing that. So as that one side of, or the yin to the yang or whatever it is, when the guy checks the boxes and you need him to perform and then he performs, be a little more aggressive. Like start moving him up 50 spots on the top 100 or whatever you need to do. On the flip side of that, when the guy that I was just talking about, does it all the way up to AAA, then goes to the big leagues, can't quite get it, I am much slower to move that guy down because he's done literally everything.
Right.
The last thing. So I should be very slow to move him down because he's answered all those questions, and then we just have a little bit of a blip at the end. And I'll lower my expectations. I don't think it's going to be an all-star anymore. Is it more 2 to 3 win guy as opposed to 3 to 5 win guy? Yes, I think that's my expectation now. But if your question is Jared Kelenic, is he ever going to be an everyday player for even one season of his career? The answer is yes. How many, how good, don't know, but it seems insane that after 123 games, we're like, well, let's forget the last 6 years we have with Jared Kelenic. He's done. Like, that's pretty reactionary and dumb. But I like to have like an overarching, like, sort of construct to think about it. And I think it is the Juan Soto and A-ball hit the gas, and then Jared Kelenic and the big leagues not hitting. Like, let's slowly go down that hill, not too fast.
Yeah, I'm still, just because it's impossible for me to give up on the version that I saw pre 2021. By the way, it is worth pointing out that in Tacoma so far, in 42 games for Kelenic, he's hit 298, 359, 607 to do the Simpsons things. That's good. He also struck out 51 times in 195 plate appearances. That's bad. So there is still, I think, long-term hope for this guy. If you're playing in a deeper dynasty league, I'm still holding out hope. I do wonder if he needs maybe a revamped type of swing thing. We have seen that happen with players before, but that's going to be like a couple of years before you see him live up to the hype. I want to talk to you about this guy before we start talking about the MLB draft, and I do an amazing ad read. Because this guy, to say he was off my radar, is the understatement of understatements, and his name is Esteury Ruiz. So I'm just going to read the minor league numbers for people who are not familiar with this guy. In 77 games in the minor leagues, he hit 333, 467, 560, 13 home runs, 46 RBI. I'm going to bring up the RBI just because I wanted to lead one more thing into the fact that he has stolen 60 bases in 77 games. Kiley, this was a guy that I basically forgot about after he got traded from Kansas City to San Diego because, my mind, one fact goes in, another goes out. Esteury Ruiz was replaced by like how I turn on my air fryer. Like that.
Ball 3.
Now, I have to ask you, as somebody who may not have seen Esteury Ruiz live, but as someone who is certainly talking to people, how legitimate is what Esteury Ruiz, what he was doing in the minor leagues? How legitimate is this?
Well, the first thing I would say to comment on what you said is I believe the correct term is RSBI. And
thank you.
You pronounce it that way. I'd love to hear David Roth's opinion on that, actually.
He was on the last one, and I'm working on the time machine. I'll ask him the next time.
So yeah, he was a guy. I'm not positive I've ever seen him in person, but he was a guy that like had some buzz with Kansas City right as San Diego traded for him, which I think gave people some vibes of Fernando Tatis Jr., who had like buzz that he was breaking out, playing essentially behind closed doors, not in official minor league games, who then got traded to San Diego because AJ Preller like literally goes and watches these like extended spring games and trades for guys when he likes somebody. And this was almost that exact same thing. And then I'm looking at his Fangraphs page. So he had an over 200 ISO and then in a short stint over 300 ISO in rookie ball for Kansas City when they got him. The next couple of years, his ISO goes down to 175, then 150, then 118. Then he becomes, and then missed the 2020 season because of the pandemic. And then he becomes Rule 5 eligible of the Rule 5 that never happened. Because somebody asked me about him a couple weeks ago, like, hey, was I wrong? Is he a guy? I'm like, no, nobody, including the Padres, they didn't think he was a guy either. Like, they're on the record as saying, yeah, you can take him for 100K. And nobody did. And I've had a couple people in the industry like ask me about him in the last like month or so. And the answer is some version of like, didn't see this coming, but like every now and then, like there's like a, Shane Victorino Rule 5 where you're like, I didn't think that guy was any good. And I was right. Sure. And then he became a guy. So I guess now retroactively I'm wrong. Every now and then, like just a wild thing happens. And yeah, like the power seems to be good enough to make everything work. The contact has always been pretty good, but it's gotten better. The walks are there. The speed is at least a 70. Obviously the steals, suggest that. And I was in big leagues and you're just sort of like, okay, like, is this, again, going to like back to the Juan Soto thing. Like, all right, this guy was, sort of nobody. And then we've had some signs early in this year, like, oh, this is back to that guy that we thought he was in 2017 when he got traded. And then the numbers are so good. You're just like, if some random dude I'd never heard of and had no history with was doing this, I'd be like, well, he's on the prospect list. Like he's a 45 using sort of my future value parlance at least. And I think that's probably what he is right now. But yeah, he was essentially like off every prospect list maybe at the very end because San Diego's not that deep.
Right.
Yeah, I think he's for real because you can't look at these numbers and say, and he's in the big leagues right now.
Right.
A team that's like pretty good at eyeball scouting and promoting guys and finding roles and whatnot. It's like, no, he has to be for real. Again, going back to Kelenic, like the question is this like a 1.5 to 2.5 win, like pretty good guy that steals a ton of bases, goes all over the place, and he's more of a fantasy guy than a real life guy? Right. Or is it just like is this like a, a step up? Is it, like a profar or this year's Jorge Mateo? Is it like that kind of guy where he's like a little bit better? Or is he going to have one of those Matt Duffy seasons where he just has like a 5-win season and then he kind of sucks the next year? Like, I don't know. Everything's on at this point.
I mean, like, again, just completely was not a guy that I was paying any attention to. By the way, I'm taking a look at his numbers in the Winter League. Hit 163, 196, 209 in 46 plate appearances. So it wasn't a case of where he got hot in the winter and then improved over the summer. Yeah, this is something I'm just telling you guys right now in fantasy leagues. Unless you're playing in a super shallow 8-team, 3 outfielder type of thing, you need to go get him because he's going to help you in at least one category. He did get caught stoling in his first attempt, but I think that he's going to be good enough in the average category. I don't expect him to hit for a ton of power at the highest level, just based on what I've looked like in the swing stuff. But I think he could be a slugging percentage guy, a guy who could put the ball into the gaps and stuff like that. And then one more thing I wanted to ask you about before we get into the draft. Jack Leiter, what's going on here, Kiley? Because I think a lot of people were awfully excited. And yes, we are just talking about the stats, but the stats are atrocious. Have you heard anything here about what's going on with Jack Leiter?
So this doesn't always. We're doing a lot of prep this week and I guess the last couple of weeks for the ESPN broadcast of the draft, and
sure.
doing like the 30-second breakdown of like pulling all the video off my hard drive and pulling some stuff off the internet and putting it together and being like, all right, this is like the short answer of like Elijah Green is this, and he's got these kind of tools, and he could be this kind of guy, and let's see. And for Jack Leiter, it's this guy, he's related to Al Leiter, like. Look at him at Vandy. Look at the stuff. Look, 98 breaking ball, and for casual fans, like you don't know that like the vertical arm slot and down the mound and flat VAA and like high spin rate, like all that stuff's good too. And we didn't have time because there were so many good things, and like you're excited about the guy. We didn't have time to get to it. If it doesn't work, here's why. This is like totally irrelevant. It's like it was the highest drafted pitcher we've had in a couple of years. So you didn't get to. Well, it's. In high school, there was some concerns about command. I think even his freshman year, it was just okay. You'd scatter a little bit. Never completely answered that. It was still kind of fringy command, but like fringy in college is still pretty good. The type of pitcher he is, if the command is a little more fringy, he's throwing 4-seamers up in the zone. Like that is the pitch you throw if you want to give up home runs. And if you're not commanding it well and mixing pitches, and you have disciplined hitters at a level you haven't been to before, they're going to hit home runs. And ball's a little bit different. Et cetera, et cetera. So, like, if you ask me, like, hey, let's say he has a disaster of a season, what would happen? I'd be like, oh, he's like walking 4.5 per 9 and giving up a home run and a half per 9 innings. And go and look at those numbers, like, oh, it's over 1 home run per 9 and 5.4 walks per 9. It's like, okay, it's like, actually, I hadn't looked at it before I said that. I was hoping those numbers were close. And a really low ground ball rate because just like everything's in the air. Sure. And also like the strike zone, like from Vandy to AA, really different. Like what you're seeing at, really different. So, like, he can be all the stuff we thought he was. This is what bad would look like. And it's been, 13 starts? It still hasn't been that much time.
No.
But, like, this is what it's going to look like until he sort of dials it in. And I think some people thought he would immediately dial it in and, like, have Cy Young votes a year from now, which is, like, always unrealistic. But this is the thing that isn't said when people say, oh, pitchers scare me, or, like, oh, there's attrition and, like, risk and whatever. And you look at Jack Leiter and Kumar Rocker, like, how could this go wrong? And, like, obviously the Kumar Rocker thing went a little sideways last year and might still work out. But, like, the Jack Leiter thing, like, this is the thing, the attrition of, oh, he's not, like, hurt. He's not a different guy. He didn't lose all his velocity. Like, it's not wildly different. It's just sometimes it doesn't work. And with pitchers, this kind of thing happens a little more than it does with hitters.
Yeah. It's just a case of if you're ever expecting a pitcher to be a fast track guy, you're barking up the wrong tree, my friends, because these things happen. And like you said, the command has been, especially the control, 30 walks in 50 innings, has given up 6 home runs. I think what he's doing is he's just waiting to get really good when his first Bowman auto comes out this summer. That's what I'm thinking.
Does he still not have one?
No, he is a guy fairly famously in the card market. He is not someone who came out in Bowman draft, and he didn't come out in 2022 Bowman. So we're hoping Bowman Chrome for that first Bowman auto. It's very rare that a prospect that high profile doesn't have a first Bowman auto.
We just enough to know that that's weird because you think to be the guy you put on the cover of the box to be like, this guy.
Yeah. So I'll tell you this. One thing that they have been doing, Topps, is they've been kind of holding back prospects a little bit from Bowman draft into Bowman baseball. Like they did that with Khalil Watson because they didn't want to just completely load the product with all of these guys. You know what I'm saying? You're held off with Jordan Lawler and Marcelo Mayer and this guy and those type of guys, and then you have the Khalil Watson because you want people to buy the 2022 product. But yeah, Jack Leiter, I think long term you're still looking at a pretty darn good pitcher, but there is some work to be done. Weekends are better with MLB Sunday Leadoff coverage presented by Uber Eats. Catch the Royals take on the Blue Jays in Toronto on Sunday, July 17th at 11:30 a.m. Eastern, live on NBC and Peacock. To learn more, go to peacocktv.com/MLB. And if you want a chance to win $25,000 on the game, download the NBC Sports Predictor app powered by PointsBet and enter Sunday's free Grand Slam Pick'em contest. Oh, by the way, Kylie, you're going to have to play for the Royals because 10 of their players are unvaccinated and will not be able to make the trip. More of a corner infield profile?
Jeff Passan made that joke to me 2 days ago, and I didn't know what he was talking about. When I got the pitch alert today, I was like, that's what he was talking about. I forgot to circle back and ask him what he was talking about.
Oh, yeah, I mean, that is a real bad situation. And speaking of Toronto, I think we got to talk about this a little bit. Charlie Montoyo fired today. Do you have any thoughts on that?
I'm as confused as everybody else. I obviously that's not necessarily my beat, like the weekly.
Sure.
But I got multiple texts from scouts that are also like knee deep in the draft, like, "Hey, what's going on over there?" And I'm like, "I don't know. I was hoping you knew what was going on over there."
My buddy Ryan Divish had some tweets that even though he's not a Toronto Blue Jay reporter, that the clubhouse was basically lost there, and with how poorly they've been playing, that's a combination for not good. And John Schneider taking over as interim manager, I imagine that will be a job a lot of people want in the offseason. But
throw my hat in the ring. That seems like a fun place to go.
If you're looking for, no, I don't want to work. I don't want to work with you anyway. Let's talk MLB draft.
Well, I guess you're on the bench coach list.
I'm questioning whether I want to start with the positive or the negative. Let's start with the positive. Druw Jones. Yeah, that is a positive. A guy that I believe is pretty much unanimously considered the top prospect in his class. One, is he your top prospect in your class? And two, let's assume that he is, or even if he isn't. Where does Druw Jones rank compared to other top prospects in the last few classes?
So I was prepared for a different question. And I'm now looking at the agenda you sent me, and I just invented a different question in my head.
Oh, cool. Cool.
But it also is answered by content that is behind the ESPN Plus paywall, which is where would he rank on a top 100 immediately when he signs? Which, because I was so fascinated by this question, I spent 2 whole days when I was supposed to be doing something else and reading the top 100, which is more work than you think it is. And then luckily, one of the TV guys said, "Hey, we need your updated farm rankings to put down the side of the screen." And I was like, "Thank God I just did this."
You're welcome.
So I actually have to because I don't want to put like the preseason ones on there, like everybody.
No. Sure.
Anyway, so Druw Jones would rank 24th on my top 100. And then Tamar Johnson 30th, Jackson Holliday 36th. So just a dozen slots from top to bottom of that 1 through 3. And then next I have Kevin Parada at 77, and then like a bunch of dudes. Like I think I have 5 guys from Parada to the 120, which is the end of my 50 feature value tier. 4 through 8 from 77 to 120. So it gets pretty mixed up at that point after those 3. So I have those 3 pretty clearly separated from the rest of the group. I have Druw Jones clearly ahead of them, but it's still 6 spots, and I feel like, I don't know, 6 weeks into next season, I could flip those guys. There might be enough information to flip those guys. So all that to say, I think he's the best guy this year. I think he's the best guy this year by a decent margin, but not like a crazy margin.
Sure.
I think he is a better prospect than Torkelson, who was the consensus best guy in 2020. Looking at 21, and I had Lawler. Most people had Meyer. Obviously, Davis went first. Jack Leiter, probably gonna win the Cy Young this year. I think he is better than all of those guys, but I think him versus Meyer Lawler, if we're just doing at draft time, I think it's pretty close. I think those guys are in the same tier. I think going back to 2019 with Rutschman and Witt, I think he's probably a little better than Witt as a draft prospect, but obviously Witt took a step forward in pro ball. Rutschman, I think that's probably where it gets to be about 50-50 if you ask people in the industry, because I wrote it at the beginning of the spring. There are some people that think Druw is the best guy since Bryce Harper. Like, they go all the way back there. I would not go there. I would say Witt. I would even kind of throw in Riley Green, CJ Abrams, who I think some people thought should have gone second or third that year. I think the Rutschman, Witt, Green, Abrams, Marcelo Meyer. I think throw those guys in a group, and I think he's like in the thick of it. So I think he's, best in probably a couple years, but not necessarily, completely precedent setting once in a decade. He's not that guy, but he's certainly in that conversation. When you sort of look back 10 years, he's one of the guys you'll bring up.
To quote Andy Samberg as Nicolas Cage, that's high praise. I mean, that is a pretty high ranking. I will say this. Now, keep in mind that my list is much more fantasy oriented. Druw Jones is going to rank really, really high on my list, like exceedingly high, because I think the fact that he's going to be able to provide help in 5 categories is going to be something that you really can't underrate from the fantasy perspective. I noticed, I believe you had Tramar Johnson over Jackson Holiday when talking about that. I don't want to go too far. I don't want you to spoil your get your paper with your online subscription stuff. But I will ask, what do you think the difference between those 2 players is for you?
Well, I mean, they're like totally different as players. I think
Right.
their quality of play, yes.
Right.
So for me, Druw Jones, like the reason he's won is because there is a 10 to 15% chance that he is that Fernando Tatis Jr., Acuna, like that level of one of the best players in baseball in the big leagues at 21, 22. Like that's on the table. That's not on the table for anyone else, I guess, other than Elijah Green, but that's the whole different can of worms.
Right.
So the fact that Druw Jones is relative to his peers above average at everything and could be that guy. That's why he's number 1. Now, if he doesn't get that high, if he is merely, if he gets into that Kelenic discussion where it's like, oh, he makes the big leagues. Let's say he doesn't have the struggles, but he's just like, a 2 to 3 win player, has 1 4-win season, and then is, otherwise just like a perfectly good guy. Maybe even like Buxton, where he's like, he's good, but he's hurt a little bit. Doesn't quite get to where you want him to in his early 20s. Now, if Tramar Johnson shoots the moon, hits his top 10 to 15% percentile projection,
right.
You're talking Jose Ramirez, Rafael Devers. It's a sort of more compact, not like an NFL combine body, more of a baseball body. Will be quick moving, and it is one scout compared like what he does in sort of his posture and his hands to Mo Vaughn, which I think there's like some similarities there.
Right.
It is. I was waiting all summer. I watched him, play like 7 games at least on the summer. And I was watching his hand move in the first game. If you go look at my tweets, I put up a video of him hitting a home run. It was the first time I saw him all summer. And it was an exaggerated, like, one of these guys. And I was like, oh, he can't do that also. Like, he's going to get pulled on his hands. I go to East Coast Pro, watch him play 4 games there. And the second video, I put the slow-mo that's in that clip that's in my tweets the last couple of days. That I put those back-to-back because the home run in full motion is the giant move. And then, bat flip and the whole thing. And you're like, all right, that's a softball swing. You can't do that. And then the slow-mo is 93 on his hands that he actually got around too quickly on, hit a home run foul. And the hand move goes from this is just for the video people, to like a totally normal, just looks like Rafael Devers' current swing. And I was like, oh, he's like changing the swing based on the pitch. He's like trying to kill time, waiting for 85 to come up here. And then when 95s come in, like he just, gets right to it. I was like, oh, this guy is exceedingly special. Like he's already doing a thing that like, some guys learn in the big leagues.
Mm-hmm.
So I think, he is a special hitter, plus hit, plus power, plays second base, perfectly fine athlete, but he's not going to blow you up in that way. But he's also like, I don't know, 5'10", 200 pounds right now. It's a totally different kind of guy. But his top 10 to 15 percentile outcome is like also MVP votes.
Right.
He also, if you want to go back the last couple of years, like when CJ Abrams was a junior and all the scouts in Georgia were telling me like, hey, this is a guy, you go see him now. You're going to build some history with this guy. And after he got drafted, I'm like, who's the next guy? And they're like, oh, there's 2 kids, best pure hitters I've ever seen. It was Tramar Johnson and Cam Collier.
Mm.
And so, like, and the funny thing is, when he was 14, people thought Tramar was going to look physically like C.J. Abrams. Like, that's how early it was. People are identifying him, and obviously, he looks nothing like C.J. Abrams now. But like, when there's like track record going back to 14 years old, like playing in like events that like scouts are at, which Druw Jones also has. It's like, okay, when it also looks right and the numbers are right and he's performing and it goes back that far and it's a hitter and it's up the middle, it's just like, guys, what are we doing here? Like, these are like pretty unprecedented in terms of like the exact things they do. There's not a lot of other guys like that.
So let's get into the negative. Kiley, is this the worst college pitching class or the worst college pitching class, or is it the worst college pitching class?
Let's bring it back. Visions of the Jack Leiter conversation. So the answer I have for this is this actually wasn't going to be the worst college pitching class. I think it was going to be a pretty normal one.
Sure.
I think the two guys that would have gone between picks 5 and 15 that we would be excited about would be Connor Prelip, who missed the whole season with Tommy John and is just coming back, didn't pitch in a game this year, and Carson Wisenhunt, who missed this season with a PED suspension at East Carolina. His last start before the season, so his last official start before the Cape this year, scouts were telling me he looked like Mike Minor, which gives you an idea of the age of the scout. So he was sitting 2 to 5, touching 7. Breaking ball was a 55 or 60. Changeup might have been a 70. Strikes were pretty good, but I think he'll dial it in. And then he just didn't pitch again until 3 weeks ago. And so scouts are like, we just didn't get enough, because last year he was 90-93, kind of a pitchability guy,
right,
next to fireballer Gavin Williams. You just don't have enough. And you could argue Peyton Pallette, if he didn't blow out, that he would have gone mid-first round, sort of a Walker Buehler, but maybe even a skinnier frame, similar kind of raw stuff. And Reggie Crawford also might have been he could have done the Dylan Tate, reliever at Team USA, goes and starts all spring and then turns into a dude when you let him start the whole spring. He also blew out, didn't get to do it. So all that to say, it is the worst college pitcher draft in, I don't know, a long time, maybe as long as I've been doing this, 10, 15 years. But I think the talent actually isn't down. It was just a freak occurrence of injuries that I don't think will happen again. I mean, obviously, TJ and throwing harder is more of a thing now than it's ever been. But I think even this was a freak occurrence, and I think next year we'll have a much happier list at the end of the guys that will actually get drafted and I guess go into Bowman Chrome and fantasy and all the various injuries we'll have.
Yeah, I mean, it's just not. It's not a good group, and there are circumstances around it. How about Tidwell? Is that somebody who you think has a chance to be that best college arm? Just somebody I think that I've been asked about a little bit, and as dynasty drafts are coming up, would he rank in that same group or a little bit behind?
So for me, no. I saw him at the SEC tournament and had seen him last spring at Georgia. And for me, it was the swing and miss characteristics of the fastball are just okay. They're not great. The slider is plus when he nails it. It's been above average to plus for, well over a year now. The changeup this year got better. It was flashing plus. If you go watch his outing at Florida, I had a couple of scouting directors call me after that and say, hey, where do you have this guy? He's going to the top 10 picks if he does that again. And then he didn't do it again. So on the right day, if he's sitting 95, 98, like he will sometimes, you'll see 3+ pitches and decent strikes. The strikes were not consistent. He missed time with his shoulder. He popped up super late out of high school. If he would have had a month, he might have gotten paid out of high school. And then he was pretty good, not fantastic last year. So it's just rocky enough, and it's a little more stuff over command, not necessarily the swing and the shape to it, that it's not my guy relative to what other people have. I have him rated 52nd, and I think he'll probably go comp to early second. Whereas any person wasn't that where I have 40th, it's if he would have thrown 5 times in the SEC, I think he would have gone 15 or 20. And I might be kicking myself that I don't have him higher.
Right.
But other people are higher on him than I am. He's not necessarily my cup of tea.
That's fair. That's very diplomatic of you, and I really appreciate your diplomatic answers on this podcast.
I'm rooting for him.
Absolutely. Brooks Lee, a player that I think fantasy managers are going to be very interested in, especially if he is going to be a high pick. Spoiler alert, he is going to be a high pick. A guy who was a first-round pick that didn't sign and then put up some very solid numbers in college. Solid is probably an understatement. I think people are really into Brooks Lee as a fantasy prospect in part because of the floor. How high of a ceiling does Brooks Lee have, Kylie?
Sorry, Scout just walked in, so I had to say hello to her.
Hi, buddy.
So, yes, high floor. He's going to move to third base, if not immediately after he signs, but, pretty soon in his career. So you'll have and I guess in fantasy, the difference between shortstop and third base is not very much. He was never going to be a stolen base threat. I think it is, you could argue it's a 55 or 60 bat. There's a chance he's a, 275, 280 hitter. He's always hit, and it's a good swing. I think he's more athletic in the batter's box than he is elsewhere, which is probably what you want. I think there's 50 to 55 game power, call it 15 to maybe 25 homers, depending on how exactly the bat plays in games. I think if you round the hit tool down and the pitch selection's a little better than I think, then you might be able to get as high as 25 homers. We've obviously seen with guys like Alex Bregman, even recently, that have a pretty long college track record. The bat and pitch selection, we'll call them tools, can sometimes affect the power tool more than we think. So I think he's definitely in that discussion where at the high end, it could be 280, 25 homers in third base. And you're all right, that's really exciting. You're or it could be fringy third baseman that's a corner utility guy that hits 270 with 15. And you're kind of always looking for somebody better, but he's the left-handed side of the platoon, so he's going to play a lot. I think that's probably like the low end, like the 25 percentile outcome. So, if he gets there in 2.5 years and gives you like a bunch of ABs and is a good hitter, like that seems like a useful guy. But the reason he's not going to go in like the, very likely not going to go in the top, 3 or 4 picks. And the reason people aren't doing necessarily backflips like I was just doing over Druw and Tamar is because that ceiling is like a little bit limited. But also, like, there's scenarios where he's the best player in this draft. Like, if the guys up top don't do what they're supposed to, and he does what I said the 75 percentile outcome was, it's like, it's a pretty good player.
I'm glad you brought up the defense. I wanted to ask you about this. This is not on your outline, but I'm going to ask you about it anyway. The shift, I think it's going to change some things. How do you think it's going to play and impact, maybe not on this draft, but in drafts going forward? How much is the fact that you're not going to have second baseman playing in that hole anymore? There was an article from Jason Stark about the pie chart that is going to be tested out in the middle infield.
Sounds
Yeah, it does sound delicious, but no hot fruit. Keith Law will not be listening to this anyway. But
I'm actually getting a belated birthday celebration, and I was told that there will be a peach concoction of some sort in the pie family. I don't know if it's a galette or a cobbler or whatever it is, but it'll have hot fruit in it. So I might have to send a picture to Keith.
Okay, well, I'll have a diet peach Snapple, and we'll be very similar in that regard. But how much do you think the shift will affect, especially how teams are scouting middle infielders going forward?
So the guy that comes up most with this year is Sterling Thompson, who looked like he could have been a third baseman out of high school, and then has only played the outfield at Florida. And then late in the season, like in the postseason, he started playing second base and was like passable. He was like totally fine. I saw him in the SEC tournament, I think, for 3 games. I don't think that ball was hit to him the entire time. I was like, come on, guys. Like, just hit him some between. Hurt him a little bit.
Yeah.
But I've had some teams tell me, like, oh, we think he's fine. And then they'd kind of pause and be like, I mean, if we had the shift, he'd definitely be fine. And I'm like, oh, is he in the Michael Bush territory where it's like, oh, he can stand there. If we can have people stand real close to him, then he can play there. But, like, we can't have people stand real close to him, so it's not quite as good. So we might have to see if we can, take a little time and see if we can expand it. But, like, that kind of guy where it's like, he's with the corner outfielders with, like, a little bit of a pitch selection problem, but he might play second base. Like, that totally changes his market. And because of the shift situation, like, it can't totally change his market. And Michael Bush, another example. Like, I don't think he's ever been better than, like, a 35 or 40 defensively at second base. But now it's like, well, we can't put that guy there now. And we might have been able to before. So I think those are the sort of the edge cases. Again, if J.C. Young degrades defensively, I think he's fine, like a 45 or 50 at second and third. If he becomes a 40, like, that'll become an issue for him. There's definitely some guy, and then obviously Jacob Berry, like, maybe people thought they could hide him at second. Like, now you're not even going to try that because it was, not great at third. It's not great in right. It might be fine at first. Some of those college bats, I think it'll become an issue for. But I think those are the guys that will have the effect, and it won't be giant. I think it'll be 5 to 7 picks in most cases for like these first round picks, and then for guys later in the draft, maybe it's 20, 30 picks, maybe even full round for the guys where it's just like I know there's certain teams where if you turn him in and say I think he's going to play in a corner, that like some models just like move him down 20 picks immediately just because it's a corner guy.
Wow. I mean, I think that'll be really, yeah, that'll be a really interesting thing, I think, to follow. I mean, it's going to be interesting to follow as players develop in the minor leagues as well, but just because of the drastic change that is about to happen, assuming it does. I mean, I know they keep saying that these things, we've seen baseball say they are going to do things and then not end up doing things. I don't think that is that scenario, but at the same time, I'm a little, just a smidgen skeptical about it taking place in 2023. I don't know why, but I'm just a smidgen skeptical.
Yeah, I feel like there's been a lot of chatter about things happening, like trading picks in the draft. It's just sort of like, yeah, we're going to table that for 10 years. Like, we'll get to it.
You know what?
Animated by it to make it happen, but I'm like, I'm not sure who's animated by this.
Can you give me a 20-second answer on why draft picks, other than your allocated draft picks, are not able to be traded?
The way I was told it went down in this most recent CBA is neither side saw it as an issue they wanted to fight for. So nobody brought it up, so that it never became an issue. And then I've heard, oh no, I think the union brought it up, and it just sort of got batted down, and then they never brought it up again. I'm like, all right,
interesting.
That's a slight variation on what I was told. But I was also told that if the international draft happens, which I guess we'll find out in a week or two, there will be trading of picks as part of like both sides have proposed a version of that, and that will then become an on-ramp where if that goes pretty well, it will be domestic trading of picks in the next CBA. It'll be like sort of a pilot program, which is what I'm excited about, because the ratings for the draft on ESPN go not through the roof. They go a lot higher if Jeff can be like, they traded a guy you've heard of for a pick. And I'll be like, who's the guy they picked with it?
100%. I really hope we get around. It seems so antiquated and archaic to not be able to do it. I'm sure that they had. I mean, there was a purpose, I guess, in the days of yore when Kylie and I are both extremely young people, so we are not as familiar with this stuff. But I really hope so. I go on so many radio shows, and that's my little humble brag. And they ask me, why don't we see very many trades? And it's when I have to say, well, it's because you can't. That makes the radio host feel really, really dumb, and I don't like doing that. I mean, it's just not a lot. Yeah, I do a shoulder shrug, and they can't hear me, and then they kick me off the radio. Kylie, put on your fantasy hat here for a second. By the way, this is kind of interesting. Kylie and I both once came up with the same fantasy name at the same time for football leagues, being in different leagues and not knowing about it. We both named our team Do the Sankey Leg the year Bishop Sankey was a rookie in that class, which still makes me laugh.
That occurrence differently, which is I mentioned what it was, and you said, you stole that from me.
Well, yeah, I was trying to be nice about it, is what I was trying to do, Kylie. But if we really want to talk about it, you absolutely stole that from me.
If you want to go back to the Dane Cook, Louis C.K. thing, like, am I just ingesting everything and I don't know where it came from?
Well, then you're net in this situation. I'm just telling you that right now.
As far as it comes to my reporting at ESPN, that is not the case. I'm a good engine that knows exactly how everything got in.
So put on that fantasy hat. Give me a potential fantasy sleeper from this draft class, from people who are going to have drafts in a couple of weeks, guys who maybe have a little bit more fantasy potential than they do what you would see on a real life list.
So first, I'm going to give you my track record, because I think I got a winner for you last year.
Yep.
You went to my rankings, and I called this out, so it wasn't, you didn't have to go look at everyone else's rankings and mock drafts and stuff to figure it out. I said, there's one guy that I've got like 10 picks ahead of where he's going to go, which I think he was actually like 14 picks before he went. That I'm like, this is my pick to click. This is the guy I'm going to hang my hat on. Like, I feel totally fine with this. Everyone that told me, oh, move him down at your rankings, he's going to go later. I'm like, no. I like this guy. Don't tell me to move him down. It was Tyler Black out of Wright State. And I said, this guy's got all the markers you want. He's 20 on draft day, Canadian, played some hockey, mid-major, didn't have Cape or Team USA. Swing is easily adaptable to hitting for power. Really good performance with really good eye and contact rates for 3 years. I'm just like, all right, this is ridiculous. Why are we trying to just wait for him to do a month on the Cape? He'd go 10 picks higher. We'll just take him there now. And I bet if you redid that draft, he'd go right about where I had him right now. And we're not going to talk about the other guys I had higher than everybody else, because this is irrelevant. That one. So this year, I went back into discussion where basically I spent the entire spring up until about 3 weeks ago trying to put everyone in the order that everyone else tells me to put them in. And then at the end, once I got all the information, then I put them in my order, using all the information that's already been collected.
Sure.
Now, what I landed on, I'm a little surprised by this, because I thought I was like Mr. Upside, and like I just happened to stumble into Tyler Black, where it's like, it's a small second baseman. It's not like the sexiest upside guy.
Right.
This year I landed on Drew Gilbert out of Tennessee, because once again, he's dramatically improved his contact rate, his swing decisions, his exit velos, his max exit velos, his launch angle. Everything was better. He was a pitcher in high school. He's like a 70 makeup guy. He's like a 5'8" grinder that looks like, like a love child between like Adam Eaton and Brett Gardner. And I'm like, all right, so like at this juncture of the draft, I've got him at 11th on my board. I'm like, at that juncture, all the top tier guys are gone. And we're trying to decide like what high school pitcher is going to be a mid-rotation starter one day. Seasons. And I'm like, this guy's like a clone of Brett Gardner, who gave us like 6 3-win seasons. And he's going to be in the big leagues first out of all the position players and probably most of the starting pitchers. And at very least, he'll be a really good fourth outfielder that's like a good clubhouse presence and be a useful guy that everybody wants, that immediately has trade value to all 30 teams because he'll be in AA next year. And I was like, how much more complicated is it than that? Like, just take the guy that's a good ball player that's going to get there, that has some upside. And also, we've like seen, I think the thing that I'm like zeroing in on, and also like he's a plus runner. He's probably going to steal some bases. Like, I don't know. I think he's going to be better than everybody else, and in ways that I guess are measurable. And then I noticed once I did that, there's 2 other guys that have like a lot of the same characteristics, and that would be Zach Neto, the shortstop out of Campbell, and Jet Williams, the 5'8" high school shortstop out of Texas, who are also both short-armed, lots of contact, good athlete, play an important position, all the stuff you want. That's like so similar to Gilbert that I ended up putting them 12th and 14th behind Gilbert at 11. So those are your guys. Those are your 3 guys that I would guess Gilbert, like his over-under where he gets picked, I have him 11th, is probably like 18th and a half. And Zach Neto, I have him at 12. He actually might sneak in the top 10, but I bet his over-under is probably like 13 or 14. So I got him a little ahead of where he goes. And Jet Williams is probably more like 15, 16, 17 area. I have him 14. So Gilbert's the one who's the biggest gap where I think I disagree with people the most, and also where he's going to get picked. But those three guys, I think we are still, even like post Jose Ramirez and Altuve and Mookie Betts and Pedroia and like all these short arm guys that hit home runs, or Lindor wasn't supposed to hit for power and he did. Like, I know I'm going on forever. We're still underrating these guys, and it's still kind of ridiculous to me that 2 drafts in a row, I just keep taking all the short guys.
Speaking of, so I automatically, when I think of these type of guys, like the underrated for fantasy purposes, it's the guys that, put up the plus run times. Jordan Taylor, is this a guy that you think could have some fantasy relevance?
Is this a thing?
Yeah. Jordan Taylor was a guy that I talked to a couple of people about who were pretty impressed with him as an athlete. Do you think that could be a potential fantasy upside player?
If he does not get paid, he will turn down a lot of money. His only negative, I think, is that he is almost 20 on draft day.
Oh, okay.
19.8 is like the only negative on there, because he was a plus runner that made a ton of contact in Florida at events. Saw him last summer at that same event that I was referencing, that I saw Druw and Tamar and all those guys. And I think there's a lot of interest in like the 700K to $1 million area, probably like 3rd, 4th round overpay, I would think. But yeah, I would guess based on what I've heard that he probably signs. And yeah, he is a football background athlete. Certainly the speed to steal bases and speed to play center field. And again, does some of the same stuff I'm talking about with the guys I liked up in the first round.
Interesting. Yeah, those are the type of guys you've got to be looking at, is those guys who have a chance to steal bases. Now, it doesn't always work out. Like, we've seen plenty of guys who can put up plus times, like Christian Pache, who just end up never being stolen base guys. You see guys who weren't exactly, like Kyle Tucker was not a guy I think that people thought was going to be this huge stolen base threat. And he's been a guy who's used his acumen and maybe a little bit better speed than anticipated. I have to ask you an important question at the end, because this is important for.
I don't think for the important question though. Since you I think refined the idea of draft sleeper, I now have an even better answer for you.
Please.
I have noticed there are 3 80 runners in the high school ranks that I think are all going to get paid, or at least get offered a ton of money in the range that Jordan Taylor will. But they're all 80 runners, and Jordan Taylor's like 65 or 70. All right, so I'm looking at my rankings. If you pull them up on ESPN.com, you can see them at 112, 131, and 132. I kind of grouped them together because they're kind of similar. We have Trevor Pollard out of Georgia, Jarek Curtis out of Texas, and Greg Pace Jr. out of Michigan. I think they're all going to get offered well over $500,000 and maybe over $1 million. I bet at least one of them signs for over $1 million, and I would bet 2 out of the 3 probably sign. Those guys may immediately, I mean, depending on the organization and the sort of leanings they have the chance to put up those 30, 40 stolen base seasons in the lower minors, which I would imagine gets people to perk up in these sorts of, deep fantasy leagues and whatnot.
How does a kid from Woodward Academy in Georgia commit to go play at Washington State?
I have also asked that question and didn't get a satisfactory answer.
I don't think where it's going to end up mattering, but that is.
I can tell you he didn't make it. So the event I keep referring to is East Coast Pro. He was not invited to East Coast Pro, and I asked, how did this guy that might get $1 million? How do you not get invited? They're like, he was really bad last year.
Oh gosh!
And his swing got a lot better, and he actually, of the 3, he might be able to play shortstop. The other 2 are definite center fielders, and he's probably a center fielder, but he might be able to play short, and his swing got a lot better. All 3 of those guys were I think would have gotten less than $500K if the draft was last summer. Obviously, they were a lot younger too, but they just weren't really dudes. And this spring, all 3 of them kind of came to the forefront.
Yeah, Woodward Academy commitment, Washington State is very weird. So last week I had David Roth on to talk about the draft, and it was a conversation that had nothing to do with those players, because I think David was the first to admit he doesn't care about the draft at all. But what he does like is funny names. So I have to ask you.
Send to the dog, but I'm listening.
Okay. The first pick in the draft was Jaden Newt. The second pick in the draft was Cutter Coffee. Who had the better first pick?
I was reenacting one of the Windhorst memes. My dog does this annoying thing where she'll drop it and then drop her toy on the ground and then look at me and wait for me to pick it up. And I was like, no, you pick it up. And then she just kept staring at me. I was like,
you never have to apologize for dog stuff, my man.
I think for like funny name purposes, like just in general outside of baseball, I'd give you Jaden Newt because that's pretty weird. But like for baseball, you have to go with Cutter Coffee. It's like too baseball specific funny.
Thank you very much. That was my pick. I will say that my picks for the draft were Cutter Cuffey, Eli Jerzenbeck, and I took Eric Snow because of a personal thing about that he was a backup point guard for the Sonics when I was.
I mean, I found out about him in like March, and some people were like, "Hold on, this guy," and they all obviously went to Google image search and then sent me the photo of the point guard. I'm like, everyone knows the point guard, and very few people know the baseball player.
Yeah. So we also had the conversation that Eric Snow might have been the worst point guard for today's NBA of all time because he can't make a shot outside of 8 feet. And in today's NBA, you have to be somebody who can actually shoot the basketball. And then we started talking about Khalid Alameen and a bunch of other backup point guards. It's always fun to have.
I'm just flicking through my rankings to see if there's somebody who jumps out. Two that come to mind would be Orion Kirkering.
That was my third pick.
Oh, all right.
Yep.
And then the other one, this seems like a little too on the nose. It might be a little too bro-y for me. Maybe this could go on like a Barstool podcast. Zach Crotchfeld.
And we talked about how we didn't take about Zach Crotchfeld at the very end.
This is too on the nose, right?
David didn't know that we weren't going to be switching that. The other one, I was going to take Nazir Mule, but that felt
Mule.
Yeah. Oh, okay. Well, you know what? That's why I didn't take him, is because I wasn't 100%. No, it's just because.
As I scroll down, a couple more. A guy I found out about recently as well, Gary Gill Hill. It's a hyphenated last name, Gary Gill Hill.
That's really good.
Like, they get offered $750 out of high school. I think he's probably going to go to Wake Forest, but like, yeah, he's a real guy. Look him up on Twitter. Like, the video is very good.
Please, thank
and
you.
another one I found out about recently in Nogales High School in Arizona, Demetrio Crisantes.
Oh, that's real good. That's got to be a guy that you take. Kansas City has got to be, it's not so much the Franco Mazzucato or the Vinny Pasquantino, but there's kind of that type of feel to it a little bit, I think.
Two more from the bottom here. I got AJ Blueblaw out of Wisconsin, Milwaukee, and then Witherspoon out of high school in Florida, who had some third round buzz early in the spring, but then kind of tailed off late.
Also, David wanted to say that he was very happy that there was another Susac in this draft because he is just a little bit obsessed with former Giant backup catcher Andrew Susac. The catchers in this draft, by the way, and we'll end it on this one. It seems like it's a pretty good class. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, and if you like Susac adjacent names, we've also got a Steven Zoback. It seems like that's in the area.
Susac and Zoback. They've cleared my asbestos case real quick, but I would assume.
I ignored your question. What was the catching question?
It's good. Kevin Parada, top of that list.
Yeah. My question going into the summer was Team USA had 4 catchers. They normally have 3, college Team USA, and they had Parada, Susac, Logan Tanner out of Mississippi State, and Hayden Dunhurst out of Ole Miss. And even at the end of that event, like all of them hit poorly because they were facing that like Scott Kazmir, Simeon Woods Richardson, Shane Boz Team USA team that was going to the Olympics, and like none of them could hit anything. So they all went like over 12 with 13 strikeouts somehow.
Sure.
But at the end of that, I was like, I thought Parada was clearly the best, and I thought maybe Susac would be second, but I wasn't sure. And at the end of that, I was like, I still don't know who's best, which I think may speak to that Logan Tanner and Hayden Dunhurst, who I think probably go in the 3rd or 4th round, might be a little underrated because they looked almost as good as those guys with summer when everybody looked bad.
Sure.
And of course, we've got, I think, a classic, Jimmy Crooks Corn is also in the late 2nd, early 3rd.
I was just going to bring up Jimmy Crooks, which is such a good Mafia name. Like that's the autofill type of thing.
Where I like when there's like a mob bust and a bunch of guys get taken in, and they put some of the nicknames in the story.
Sure.
The names get really on the nose because I think the media wants the on the nose names.
Sure.
Like Johnny Crimes or whatever, and I'm like, I bet someone's named Jimmy Crooks right now.
There's gotta be. Kylie, this was fun. Please promote all of the good stuff that you are doing and are about to do.
So ESPN.com/MLB. If I do a really good job, I get on the front page of ESPN. It doesn't happen that much. I think the mock draft that comes up Friday that I'm actually going to finish tonight,
Nice.
I think that'll actually get on there. So in that case, just go to ESPN.com. But go to the MLB page, and there's a draft little like portal like land page thing. It's got all the various mock drafts and rankings and team reviews and all the various stuff that you want to see. And then Sunday, 7 Eastern on ESPN, we will be broadcasting the draft, and I'm going to try to tell you who's going to be good. And I'll just say I'm pulling some strings. I want to reenact the Trev Alberts Mel Kiper thing. Trying to pick where I think it's a bad pick, and then we'll get the GM to come on and we'll get a shouting match, go like first take style.
Oh, I look forward to that very much.
But I don't think it's going to happen. I'm not sure we can get any GMs to come on the show right after their pick. And if they do, it's probably just going to be like one softball and I'm out. And it's like, hold on. If I got some hot takes, I want to yell at somebody.
Real quick. How happy are you that the Futures game and the MLB Draft are not on the same day?
Very happy. However, you may wonder what time the rehearsal is for the draft on Sunday, because the draft on Sunday is at 4 Pacific, like 4
Sure.
time. And so they want to test the lighting and do the rehearsal on Saturday at the same time. Saturday at 4 o'clock. You want to guess what time the Futures game starts?
Saturday at
4 o'clock.
Okay, yeah, that's
so like I'll be there at some point. I hope it's in the first couple of innings, but like it might be later.
Well, if not, you get to watch some of it on Peacock, everyone's favorite.
Oh, is that what's on?
Service. Yes, sir. It is on Peacock. So
I was worried it's gonna be MLB Network, and I couldn't pull it up on my phone.
Yeah, that's what it'll be. It'll be on Peacock. It'll be a lot of fun. Everyone will have a good time. Thanks everybody for joining us. Kiley can be followed on Twitter at KileyMCD, and you can follow me. Yeah, that's okay. At Crawford_MILB. If you enjoy what you're hearing, please like, rate, subscribe, all of that good stuff. Thanks again for listening. We will see you guys pretty soon.
Sorry, there's 2 more Hawaii high school prospects.
Thanks for watching. Make sure to hit subscribe for all the latest fantasy and sports betting advice from NBC Sports Edge. And don't forget to sign up for NBC Sports Edge Plus to get the best-in-class draft guides, as well as season-long fantasy, DFS, and sports betting tools that will give you the edge.